All right, welcome to another deep dive with us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us again. We're excited for this one.
As always, this is where we take the sources you sent in and, we really get into it and see what we can uncover.
Absolutely. Try to piece it all together and, make it make sense for everyone.
Yeah, and today we're looking into what you sent us about murder case one, specifically focusing on Burton Abbott.
Yeah, the Burton Abbott case. It's a fascinating one. Lots of twists and turns and a tragic story all around.
For sure. And the information you provided really focuses on this, the death of Stephanie Bryan.
Right. That's at the heart of it all, really. Her
Yeah.
disappearance and the events that followed.
So that's what we're going to do today, try to piece all this together. We're going to go through the key facts of the case as you presented them to us.
Yeah, we want to look at the evidence, really try to understand what led to Abbott's conviction.
And, there are always those big questions that come up in cases like this, especially one as complex as this one.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely get into those as we go along. Like, what are the lasting implications of this case? There are still questions being asked today, so many years later.
Okay, so let's get started. Like you said, this all begins with a disappearance. April 28, 1955, 14-year-old Stephanie Bryan vanishes after school.
In Alameda County, California, which, for those who might not know, is across the bay from San Francisco.
Right, and a huge search gets underway. But initially, there's really not much to go on. They only find a textbook.
Just a school textbook out in a field. Pretty unsettling, right? No sign of Stephanie herself.
Definitely unsettling, and it really kind of sets the tone for this whole story, just this sense of unease.
Definitely. And, the case goes on for a couple of months with very little progress. Then things take a really sharp turn.
And this is in July of 55, right?
Yeah, July 55. A woman named Georgia Abbott contacts the police. She says she's found Stephanie Bryan's purse.
Wow, and where was the purse?
In the basement of her own home? Can you
Yeah.
imagine that?
That's incredibly disturbing. I mean, to find something like that connected to a missing girl in your own house.
Absolutely. And it gets even stranger. According to what you sent us, George's mother-in-law, Elsie Abbott, she'd actually found the purse earlier.
Wait, she'd found it before but didn't report it.
Yeah, didn't connect it to the missing girl at the time, apparently. Didn't really think much of it.
So already we've got some odd circumstances, right?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot we're going to unpack here.
So the purse is found, police get involved. What happens next?
Well, naturally, they search the entire Abbott house, top to bottom. They do find a few things. Some school books, glasses, even a brassiere.
Okay, but no Stephanie.
Right. No sign of Stephanie herself, which is, obviously what they were hoping for.
And from what I'm seeing here in the information you've given us, there was nothing else at the house that definitively placed Stephanie there, right? Nothing that couldn't be explained away, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right. But then the investigation takes another big turn. The police decide to search somewhere else. The Abbott family's weekend cabin.
Okay, so now we're moving beyond the house itself. Where was this cabin?
It was way up in the Trinity Mountains, like 300 miles away from their home. It was remote, pretty isolated.
That's a significant distance. What led them to search there? I mean, it's not exactly close by.
Well, I think at that point, suspicion was really starting to focus on the Abbott family. Finding the purse, even those few items, it all raised a lot of red flags.
It makes sense. They needed to explore every possible connection.
Yeah.
And what did they find at the cabin?
This is where the story takes a truly tragic turn. They find Stephanie Bryan's body.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, it was a horrific discovery. Her body was badly decomposed, buried in a shallow grave near the cabin. The cause of death, according to the information you provided, was bludgeoning.
So now we have a murder investigation.
Right, and all eyes are on Burton Abbott.
He becomes the main suspect. But you mentioned earlier that the evidence was circumstantial.
Yes, and that becomes a huge point of contention in this case.
Okay, so we need to be clear about what that means. Circumstantial evidence. It's not like someone saw Burton Abbott with Stephanie or there was a smoking gun, so to speak.
Exactly. It's more like a puzzle where each piece might suggest something, but nothing directly proves he did it.
I see. So what were the specific pieces of this puzzle that led to Abbott becoming the main suspect?
Well, the main thing was forensic evidence. Hairs and fibers found on Abbott's car were analyzed and compared to samples from Stephanie.
And they matched.
They did, which obviously raised huge red flags. It placed her, or at least suggested she had been in his car at some point.
That's a pretty big piece of the puzzle then.
It was. And of course, the discovery of her belongings in his basement, that couldn't be ignored.
Right, even though his defense would later try to explain that away. So you've mentioned Burton Abbott a few times now. Just to be clear for our listeners, who was he? What do we know about him?
Right. So Burton Abbott, at the time, he was a 27-year-old accounting student. He was studying at UC Berkeley, lived in Oakland.
Okay, so a seemingly normal guy going to school, living his life.
Yeah, on the surface, nothing that would make you think, oh, this is the guy who'd be accused of a terrible crime like this.
And that's what makes these cases so unsettling sometimes, right?
Absolutely. It's the ordinariness that can be so jarring.
So Abbott is arrested, becomes the main suspect. What happens next?
The case goes to trial, and it becomes a huge media spectacle.
You mentioned that earlier. What was it about this case that drew so much attention?
I think it was a combination of things. You had this young girl, the brutality of the crime, and then this seemingly average guy accused of doing it.
Right, it had all those elements that capture people's attention, for better or worse.
Yeah.
And what was the prosecution's strategy during the trial?
Well, remember, all they really had was circumstantial evidence. So their theory was that Abbott had attempted to rape Stephanie.
Oh, so they were saying that was the motive.
Exactly. They argued that he attacked her, she resisted, and that's when he killed her.
A very serious accusation.
Absolutely. They went even further, actually, portraying Abbott as a sexual deviant, a sexual psychopath.
Wow. Those are incredibly strong words to use. It seems like they were really trying to paint a very specific picture of Abbott for the jury.
They definitely were. And according to the information you provided, they used some pretty strong tactics to do that. Like, they actually showed the jury Stephanie's decomposed clothing.
Wow. That must have been very difficult to see, even for the jury.
Oh, I'm sure it was. And according to some accounts, they even held up her undergarments at one point.
So it sounds like they were really trying to elicit a strong emotional response from the jury.
It definitely seems that way. They were trying to make a case, and they knew they didn't have that slam dunk evidence.
So how did Abbott's defense respond to all of this? I mean, what arguments did they make?
Well, their main argument centered around the basement where Stephanie's belongings were found. Remember, it had been used as a polling place.
Right, so their point was that anyone could have put them there.
Exactly. They argued that someone else could have planted the evidence, that Abbott was being framed.
And what about the attempted rape accusation? How did they address that?
Well, the pathologist who examined Stephanie's body testified that because of the decomposition, it was impossible to determine if a sexual assault had taken place.
So there was no physical evidence to support that part of the prosecution's theory.
Right. They were basing it solely on their interpretation of the events, not on any concrete findings.
And how did Abbott himself behave during the trial?
The information you sent says that he took the stand for 4 days. They say he was very calm, very composed.
I mean, can you imagine the pressure he must have been under?
I can't even imagine. He consistently denied any involvement, and he actually called the whole case a monstrous frame-up.
A very strong statement. And after all of that, the testimony, the evidence, the closing arguments, what did the jury decide?
They deliberated for a full 7 days. Can you imagine the weight of that decision?
7 days. That's a long time to be considering a case like this.
It is. But ultimately, they came back with a guilty verdict. First-degree murder.
So Abbott is convicted. What was the sentence?
The judge sentenced him to death.
The death penalty. Wow. And this was based solely on circumstantial evidence.
That's right. And remember, Abbott was still maintaining his innocence throughout the whole thing.
So what happened next? I mean, was there an appeal?
Oh, yeah. Under California law at the time, a death sentence automatically triggered an appeal to the state Supreme Court.
So there was still a chance that the conviction could be overturned?
There was, but it didn't happen. The Supreme Court reviewed the case, all the evidence, the arguments, everything.
And their decision.
They upheld the conviction and the death sentence.
So at this point, Abbott is out of options at the state level.
It seems that way. But his lawyer, George T. Davis, he wasn't giving up.
He was determined to save his client's life. This is where we get into what you call the dramatic events surrounding the execution date.
Yeah, March 15th, 1957. This is where it gets really intense.
Okay, so walk us through it. What happens?
So Davis is frantically trying to get a stay of execution. He files appeals with the U.S. Court of Appeals.
Okay.
They're all denied. It's a race against time at this point.
It's like something out of a movie, just this desperate scramble to stop the execution.
It really is. So Davis knows he needs to get to the governor, Goodwin Knight, who has the power to grant clemency.
And this is where it gets even more complicated, right? Governor Knight wasn't exactly easy to get hold of.
No, he wasn't. He was actually at sea on board the aircraft carrier, the USS Hancock.
So how does Davis reach him?
I mean, this is back in '57, right? No cell phones, no easy communication. He actually gets a TV station involved, broadcasts a plea to the governor to intervene.
Wow, that's incredible. Using the power of media to try and reach the governor.
It was a desperate move, but it worked. Governor Knight hears the plea, and he grants a 1-hour stay of execution.
Oh, thank goodness. So Abbott is given a reprieve, at least for a little while.
Right, but this is where the confused legal procedures, as your sources call it, come into play.
Okay, what do you mean? What happens?
While that 1-hour stay is in effect, Davis files a writ of habeas corpus with the California Supreme Court. Basically, this is a legal challenge to the legality of someone's imprisonment.
Right, so he's basically saying Abbott's detention and the impending execution are unlawful.
Exactly. But the court denies it. Then he tries the federal district court, but they also refuse to postpone the execution further.
So now what? Time is running out again.
Right. Davis manages to reach Governor Knight a second time, and the governor agrees to another stay. This is all happening within that initial 1-hour reprieve.
But the execution is still scheduled to go ahead.
Yes, it is. And this is where it gets truly heartbreaking. It's a matter of minutes now. Abbott is taken to the gas chamber. It's 11:15 a.m.
While the governor is trying to contact the warden to issue the stay.
You got it. It's this incredible race against time. But just 3 minutes later, at 11:18 a.m., the executioner pulls the lever.
He drops the cyanide pellets. And at that exact moment,
Governor Knight reaches the warden to issue the stay. But it's too late. The warden tells him there's nothing they can do.
Abbott is already dead.
He dies at 29 years old.
Just a few minutes, maybe even seconds from being granted another stay. It's hard to even fathom how close that was.
It really is. This whole sequence of events, it made national news, and for good reason. It really exposed some serious flaws in the legal system.
I mean, it's unthinkable that someone could be executed while there's still a chance, however small, of a legal reprieve.
And that's exactly what happened here. The sources you sent highlight this conflict between the federal 90-day window for a writ of certiorari, which is basically a request for the Supreme Court to review a case, and the state court setting an earlier execution date.
So he was essentially denied his right to due process at the federal level because the state set the execution date before that 90-day window had closed.
That's the argument, and it's a powerful one. It's not surprising that this case reignited the debate over the death penalty, especially in cases that rely solely on circumstantial evidence.
And then there's Elsie Abbott, Burton's mother. She never gave up on her son.
Never. It's a really important part of the story. She maintained his innocence until she died at the age of 100.
Wow. That's an incredible testament to her belief in him. What were her thoughts about the case?
Well, she believed that the real killer was still out there, that Burton had been framed. She even had her own theory.
Oh, really? Who did you think was responsible?
At one point, she even suspected her own brother, Wilbur Moore, of setting Burton up. She never fully let go of that suspicion.
That's a pretty serious accusation to make against your own family member.
It is, but she was absolutely convinced that Burton was innocent. She also pointed to his physical condition. She said he was too small, too frail to have carried Stephanie's body and dug a grave.
It's clear that she knew him better than anyone. And from what you've said, her belief was shared by the rest of the family.
Absolutely. They all called him Bud. They all stood by him throughout this whole ordeal. And Elsie's reactions during the trial, they were heartbreaking. She vowed to keep fighting, to clear his name, even after his death.
And she did, didn't she? She spent years trying to find new evidence that might exonerate him.
She really did. She offered rewards, tried to get the Alameda County grand jury to reopen the case.
It's a shame they didn't take her seriously.
You're telling me. And then there's Keith Walker, who wrote the book A Trail of Corn. He's studied this case for years.
And what did he conclude?
He believes Elsie was right. He thinks Burton Abbott was innocent.
Wow. And there was that interesting point you brought up earlier from his book about the trail of corn.
Yeah, that was a phrase the district attorney used, implying that Abbott had deliberately left clues. But Walker's question is, did he really leave those clues? Or did someone else plant them there?
That goes back to the whole issue of circumstantial evidence. It's all about interpretation, isn't it?
Exactly. It's not as clear-cut as direct evidence. It leaves room for doubt.
So what happened to the other people involved in this story?
Well, Georgia Abbott, Burton's wife, she changed her name and moved away after the execution. I can't imagine what she went through. And their son, Chris, he wasn't told the truth about his father until he was an adult.
That must have been incredibly difficult for him to process.
I'm sure it was. Burton's brother, Mark, he also maintained Burton's innocence until his own death. And Wilbur Moore, Elsie's brother, and the man she suspected, he passed away as well.
So it's a story filled with tragedy, with unanswered questions, and really, it makes you think about the limits of our justice system.
For sure. When you have a case that hinges on circumstantial evidence and an execution that happens just minutes before a potential reprieve, it forces us to confront some really uncomfortable truths about the death penalty.
It really does. And Elsie Abbott's unwavering dedication to her son's memory, it serves as a reminder that there are always multiple perspectives, multiple sides to every story.
Exactly. And her tireless efforts to uncover the truth, they should inspire all of us to question, to dig deeper, and to never stop seeking justice.
Well said.
Oh.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the biggest question that lingers is, what else might be out there? What other pieces of this puzzle might still be hidden, waiting to be found? Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next deep dive.